Okay, live.
Greetings, everyone. This is Sangeet Growar, your host for today's event. I welcome you all to this first webinar series of Beyond Boundaries. The main objective of today's webinar is how we can reorient or reposition ourselves during and after this COVID crisis. And of course, this whole effort is being made to cheer you all up. We will have many more webinars, each with a different topic and theme. All of them will have brilliant speakers and distinguished achievers. Our main focus will be on reorientation, innovation, and entrepreneurship. Okay, just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the comments box. I will bring them up after all the speakers have finished. With that note, let me introduce you to our first speaker, and he's the primary speaker, Mr. Sandeep Aneja. Sandeep is the founder of Kaizen West. He is a renowned speaker on emerging investment and impact trends globally, and a prized supporter and investor in education, wellness, and smart living. He has been part of venture capital and private equity industry since 2002 and has been credited with numerous successful transactions in the United States and in Asia. He sits on the boards of various education companies. Sandeep, the stage is all yours.
Thank you so much, Sangeet. Appreciate the amazing introduction. I hope I live up to it. I'll do my best. And thank you, Vivek, and everybody that's behind the scenes working on this for giving me the opportunity to be here. And thank you, everybody who's making time on a Saturday. Hopefully, it's still Saturday for you. You're not waking up somewhere else where it's not yet Saturday. Anyway, thank you so much for making time. Um, as much as we look at this webinar as yet another COVID-related webinar, I think I'll start off with what I see my role as today. My role today is not going to be to introduce a new subject to you, a new subject matter to you. My role today is to help you think through things in a slightly different way. And if I achieve it through some of the words, some of the conversation we have here, I'd be satisfied with that. I believe that it is a strong opportunity for us to examine our own assumptions and examine future options in a different way, thereby arriving at something that is more meaningful to us, particularly as this relates to jobs, skills, and livelihood. So I'll remain focused within that domain and try not to deviate from that. But just to set context, this is not the first time where we've seen humanity's challenge with small germs. This is not the first time where we've seen major disruption occur. The Black Plague in the 1300s took away significant number of lives in Europe. And over the years, we've seen many such events occur, particularly in Asia. We had numerous germs, starting with malaria being one very prominent one, which actually hampered Europe's efforts to colonize Asia. Later on, we saw many germs emanating in Europe, such as smallpox, and going to North America. And therein, a lot of the deaths caused in North America when Europe's invasion took place were by the germs, not by the hands of the Europeans invading themselves. So to underestimate the power of germs and to believe that this is the first time we're seeing it is perhaps not supported by history. However, there is something that's occurring which is rather unique today, and which is that this germ is taking place in the time of uh, public relations being very active, person-generated content being very active. So this virus comes attached with its own public relations machinery, and therefore we need to be cautious and thoughtful about it. Before we go too much further, I think it's important we thank the healthcare workers who've been fighting this pandemic at the front lines. And we must also acknowledge their impact and the incredible effort they're putting in to make our lives safer. Maybe a 30-second, maybe a 2-second, break to think about them and thank them. It's very important for us to do so. So, while this fight is being fought by the healthcare workers at the front lines, this fight is also being fought by each one of us individually. at homes, working with our families, supporting our friends in need, being pillars of strength to society and to our neighbors, and sometimes doing the right thing by being absent. So, this is all very heartening. But as we imagine our own future as individuals under this cloud of uncertainty, what is it that we are facing? What are some of the bigger challenges that we're facing? I think I'm going to first of all focus on some of the big tectonic shifts that have taken place in the recent past and which will continue to be there for the foreseeable future, and then focus on their impact on our lives, work lives primarily. Number one, I think one of the biggest shifts that is taking place is the emphasis on real estate as an asset. Real estate and commercial real estate related to offices, restaurants, and other areas. So far, we've been quite satisfied with using offices as the primary place of work and being satisfied with about 40% of the day being utilized, the 60% of the day not being utilized. That never occurred to us that what's happening at 60% of the asset? What are we doing with it? But imagine the counter possibility of utilizing 100% of an asset that's a home as part of your work base as well. So that's a reality dawning upon a lot of the employers, and it's likely that a lot of the employers going forward will suggest strongly to their employees, whoever are strong islands of production as opposed to strong team workers from the day one, to work from home. And that may become our reality in the future. We also took for granted about restaurants the idea of stepping out, the idea of associating stepping out with some sort of a status symbol. That's perhaps going to change as we all start to take cooking and being more healthy at home, hopefully. And hopefully we take that path and not going and cooking too much and eating too much, but hopefully we'll all be healthier as a result of it. And those are some of the key changes which we are facing just on the real estate side of things. We all know tourism and travel is getting affected. We know that India, for example, 10% of our GDP comes from tourism, and 8% of the employment comes from tourism as well. However, this is going to have a longer term impact, and longer term solutions will be coming into play. One thing that is taking place, which is not getting quantified yet, is the global reverse migration of workers who had moved to the bigger cities in the search of a dream, in the search of establishing themselves in a city of dreams. Those dreams have been broken for a lot of the workers. They have found it more valuable after having been abandoned by those cities to a certain extent to go back to their own hometowns, to their families, and examine the purpose of their own movement to cities and see if they could reestablish themselves in an agrarian rule. And if they can think through and they realize that the world is different, then employers of such workers in cities have to examine their options from the ground up again, how that will play out for people who can create a whole new economy based on the presence of such workers. Another thing that we've taken for granted, which is getting changed, is our focus on and our demand for perfect quality at all times. That is changing. People are now going to counterweigh quality with safety. You cannot anymore expect perfect quality like on the airline, a perfect meal appearing in front of you, and then criticizing the quality of meal on internet forums. That's no longer going to be the case, at least for a while. It'll be perhaps easier if instead of a person bringing the meal to you, the meal automatically showed up in a prepackaged form. That's efficiency. That is not service quality. And that's also about safety and distancing. So the human brain will have to reorient itself towards focusing on safety. So let me sort of take some of those examples and focus on the workplace a little bit and bring to fore uh, how some of the workplace realities are changing. One of the biggest changes that is taking place, and which I think is going to require a significant shift from employees themselves, is number one, the fragmentation of work itself. Each job, in my opinion, is going to get more and more specialized. Super specialization, which was starting to emerge, is going to become a bigger, deeper trend. A typical 40-hour work week learned by, provided by um, a person who's working 40 hours a week at an office may be replaced by four people working 10 hours a week in four different specialization areas in four different locations. That may occur. That's starting to occur. So, what does that mean in our own requirement for skilling? What does it mean? Where second thing we need to focus on, if you really think of it from a very dispassionate perspective, the creation of value was driven by humans, but humans were always intermediates. They were in the middle of what was needed and what was done. Like the internet disintermediated a lot of service provision, I believe as we go forward, because of disintermediation, because of distancing, humans themselves will get more disintermediated and will have to be more self-reliant as a result. What does that mean? That again points towards specialization and readiness to change. The other thing that we're realizing all the time is webinars like this are now more virtual. They are not happening face to face. While networking goes down, attention goes up, I think, and perhaps things will change in this manner as well. Work life balance is getting questioned. The hours of work are blending into hours of life and vice versa. But that's maybe not such a bad thing if people over time can find a balance, and that's a requirement. And another thing that's emerging is the focus on hard skills versus soft skills and acquiring those soft skills. Let me give you some examples of some of those skills. It's not any longer good enough for a teacher to be a good subject matter expert. It's now necessary for a teacher teaching online to be a great actor, to be an engaging person so that the students don't fall asleep. And how that works will differ from age group by age group for the teacher, and different levels of skills will be required. An SME owner, a small medium enterprise owner, who so far is running an industry in a far-flung area, may have questioned the value of automation. That no longer is a choice. May have questioned the value of using local labor. That's no longer a choice. How do you work with better quality, maybe trained labor? And how do you no longer rely on third party training? How do you make training a core competence of your own organization? Is going to be a good question to be asked by many SMEs. Typical office jobs, which were typically about sitting at an office desk and working, were no longer going to be as they used to be. We are expecting productivity to be higher. We are expecting typical office jobs where we were uh, paying people for a certain skill set. We may end up paying them a little bit more for better quality communication equipment, for better quality equipment to work from home, because productivity now will require a lot of high quality communication. So employers may be required to pay towards that as well. A lot of the entertainment, which was in person, may become virtual. A lot of the uh, uh, streaming, Netflix is becoming ubiquitous, and streaming services are growing faster, which means a lot of the actors, people behind the scenes, will have to retrain themselves. And a lot of the production already has shifted virtually. It'll shift further virtually. So just a few more minutes and then I'll hand over to the next speaker. But I would like to focus on this as a key part of my message to you, which has to do with where we are today as people seeking to find employment or to people seeking to create value. I believe that we have moved from a digital economy to a distance economy, further strengthened by digitalization. So, what, as an individual, as you seek to examine your own future, is the number one personal trait you need to be able to embrace? I believe that is change. I think it's important for a lot of times to be able to embrace the fact that change for the good is change that is necessary today. Examine at the very core what is the purpose of your role in life. While you do that, make sure that you understand and reassess whether you were pre-COVID on a journey that took you in the direction of solving for that purpose or solving for that particular aim in your life. If it was something that you were doing as a matter of habit, then you need to question that. I need to examine that where you are headed today, and can you reorient yourself today to be able to get back on the path of the purpose that you were designed for, that you intended to be a part of. The good news is that for the first time, there are significant reskilling options available to you, which were not available earlier. Why now? Because I think for the first time, in a matter of haste, a lot of the online and virtual training providers have had to think through how they can provide better quality, engaging product. They've actually been able to experiment like never before, and the quality of product coming out is going to be really amazing. So the whole mystery around whether online learning and training would develop proper skills is going to go away, and it'll be a strong replacement, including blended learning replacement, to just going to a particular classroom and taking lessons to find a skill. So first time for a lot of people to look into this as an alternative to reskilling themselves. Second part, and this is, I'm breaking it down to functional matter. One, when we were part of an office, we were all going to the water cooler theoretically, or a common coffee machine, or we had the luxury of a coffee machine and you could go and sit and talk around it and discuss things. My goodness, that is not happening anymore. But guess what happened at the coffee machine? The communication was about handing over work, and a lot of it was social. That's not happening anymore. Now you have to, on every phone call, be very crisp, very clear, with an objective that you can convey to the other person. If you're not crisp and clear, then the phone call is lost, then the WebEx or the Zoom call or the other virtual call is lost. So clarity of communication is critically important today. Being prepared for your conversation is critically important today. You could just walk up to the coffee machine earlier with your colleagues and say what was on your mind. Well, you can't do that anymore. You really have to be clear before you enter into a conversation what you're going to talk about. And so being prepared is critical. Communication as a soft skill is going to become critically important. On the employer's side and other business partners' side, understanding the nuance of body language through voice is critical. You may think it's not possible, but we don't have a choice. Human beings are pretty sharp. We will learn to evaluate truth and false based on the quality of voice very soon if we really have to. And the body language that we see on an image, such as a web image, will be a good replacement, not a perfect replacement, will be a good temporary replacement or an augmentation of how we read each other. It'll have to be the case, and virtual reality may help. While those things seem far off, but we will learn, we will unlearn and relearn. And that's a critical skill, again, which we should be acquiring and focusing on. Another thing to think about is we have always considered degrees are important. Well, everybody is now going to question degrees very rapidly. It's already occurring. It is much more meaningful to look at skills, what you bring to the table as important, and where you can acquire them than just the degree. A degree is very self-centered. A skill is much more meaningful because that creates value. Hopefully, I'll end the focus on the individual with one line, and that is, if you are today questioning what your role is and where you should head in your life, I think relying on oneself and viewing yourself as a creator of value, someone who creates value for oneself and for people around them, is way more important than someone who's looking for a job. The time is much more important now. It's becoming and been in that direction for a while, but realization is dawning upon a lot of people that it's better to be someone who creates value for oneself and for others. So with that, I will hand over the mic to Sangeet, who will introduce the next speaker, and hope this was useful and happy to take questions. Thank you so much.
Sandeep, that was quite interesting. Thank you so much for this. I really liked your statement where you said productivity will require a lot of high quality communicative talent. I think that's the area we need to work upon now. And creating value for oneself is going to be important. Thank you so much for this. Our next esteemed speaker is a beautiful lady in and out, Miss Navneet Sandhu. Navneet is a professional certified coach. She has over 20 years of experience. She has held positions in organizations in Canada and India and is involved in people and organization development across APAC and Africa currently. She runs her own learning and talent development firm and is also part of world-class research organizations. Her work revolves around bringing out the true potential in individuals. Navneet, please take over the stage.
Thank you, Sangeet. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. Thank you so much for being with us on this webinar. It is indeed an honor and a privilege to be here with you. My work as a behavioral coach is a very interesting and passionate thing that I take very seriously. I have the privilege of speaking with people on a very deep level, and I come to know from all my clients, be it students, be it homemakers, be it senior citizens, corporate leaders, entrepreneurs, etc., what it is that really makes them, change or adapt to something what we are facing right now. So when I speak today, I said, what can I bring to this forum that will help maybe create a little bit of awareness in you and help you discover where you are on this journey. So I bring two very quick and simple frameworks with you and see if that is of use to you. The first framework that I want to share with you is something that we call the circle of concern versus the circle of influence or control. What that is, show you here as a visual that I have drawn, and I hope you're able to see this, that there are two circles. The outside circle is the circle of concern, and the inside circle is the circle of influence or control. Ask, what are these? So, the circle of concern are the things which are on your mind, they concern you, but you don't have any control over them. So if we take the example of the present pandemic going on, so things that will come in the circle of concern would be things such as the coronavirus itself. You have no control over it. The politics of the coronavirus, the economic crisis that we are facing right now, the news that is bombarding us from everywhere, the social media feed that you probably access every day, etc., etc. Other people, things that are outside of you. While the inner circle, which is the circle of influence or of control, is where you have some influence and you can work out of that area. That is your own attitudes, your own behaviors, what you choose to see on the news, for example, what you choose to share with other people on your social media, and how you choose to stay away from obsessive negativity. So I hope this framework helps you see that it makes sense to operate out of your circle of influence or control and expand that. So as I start working with things that I can control or influence, my influence increases and my concern as a result starts to dull away. And which is the way to. The second thing that I wanted to share with you was another simple framework. Now, you might ask, as humans, how do we change? Or what is the process? We all know is important. We don't have a choice. We are living through pandemic times, and change is the only constant. So I thought, let me share another framework, which we call in the behavioral sciences the change curve. Now, this curve, which almost resembles a U, and there are 6 stages in this curve. I will take you through each of the stage, and you can see, and it might be helpful to you to see where you are and where others are on this curve. So whenever a change comes in, right, drawn with this visual, stage number one kicks in, which is usually the stage of denial. It's a stage of shock or of loss. We have no idea what hit us, and we just move on with it. And we move to stage two, which is the stage of resistance. Now, this is the stage where we see a lot of emotions come to the fore. So we see displaying anger, disappointments, disillusions, isolation, and probably even some of us borderlining on depression. Stage one and two here, these are stages where you're operating out of your circle of concern. And that's why is downward. You're not making progress towards the change. So the status quo prevails. How, if you move to stage three, which is right here, which is the stage of confusion and doubt. Now, this is a very important stage because this is the stage which helps you pivot. This is at the bottom of the U, and this is the stage where you start asking questions. Your brain is opening up to the change now, and you realize realize that this change is here to stay. Two times you probably thought, okay, it's a little thing. Once the lockdown is over, we're going to go back to our old ways. Well, here you start realizing maybe not. And you start questioning, where am I with this change? What is this change? Let me discover the actual realities and facts of this change. And hopefully, this pivot upwards rather than going backwards into the regressive cycle. Stage 3, you move to stage 4, which is, as you can see, the stage of acceptance. Acceptance, you have accepted the change. You know you have to move forward with it. The world has to move forward with it. So what do? You start building yourself up. You get into a stage of exploration. So you actually move from a stage of disruption into a stage of exploration here. Disruption is important for transformation to take place. Any kind of transformation is actually it's a post-requisite of disruption. Except when I'm willing to explore. What do I need to do? Perhaps I need to switch careers. Perhaps I need to reconsider what are the skills I have, etc. As I acceptance, I move to the next stage, which is finding solutions and problem solving, which is stage number 5. Now, this is the stage which will give you leaps forward. This will take you leaps forward. This is the stage where you innovate, where you think outside the box, where you actually start problem solving. You fail your way to success. Nothing is written in stone. You are discovering things. So you're coming with a very open mindset. You're coming with a learner's curiosity, and you are just moving along, testing and retesting things that work. So there is learning, there is unlearning, there is relearning, and the cycle continues. And hopefully, you find out some best practices. Finally, you reach the stage, the last stage, stage 6, which is the stage of integration. So this is the stage where you become familiar with the new normal, the new routine, and you integrate yourself to the new realities of life. And the curve starts flattening out up until another change hits us and we go into the cycle again. So that's primarily the change cycle. It's an important concept to understand. It's important to know where you are with this and where would you like to move forward with it and how do you cover the gaps. Now, when you see this, obviously there will be gaps that you have to cover. What are some of those gaps? So some of those gaps are some of the skills that might be required, as Sandeep also pointed out, as we move and navigate through present times and into the future. So some of the skills that might be required are the skills such as communication. Communication is the mother skill required, and over communication is better than under communication in such uncertain times. Building relationships. Trust is the currency of building relationships. So how do you build relationships? How do you become a trustworthy source? How do you maintain trust, etc.? Becoming a better listener, becoming a good active listener, demonstrating empathy, which is understanding people on a deeper level. Emotional intelligence. Remember, people are demonstrating a lot of emotions. There's a lot of chaos going on outside as well as inside of them. So you need to understand them there, and you need to understand yourself there as well. Developing resilience, that's another big one. Because remember, change is a process. It's not an event. So better is, develop the grit and the resilience to not only survive through it, but thrive at the end of it. Agility, flexibility, adaptability are some of the other skills that might be required. And finally, what's most important is to come from a very open mindset, to come from a learner's mindset, curious about things. We do not know what the new world will bring us. So we just need to focus on the idea of possibilities and just run with it. So I really hope that these frameworks and some of these skills is something that you'll reflect on, and I hope these are useful for you. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm willing to take questions at the end of it. Thank you.
That was a really wonderful session, Navneet, especially the change curve that you showed us. I'm not sure whether we've reached the acceptance stage yet or not, but anyway, and the key skills that you mentioned that need to be developed, the communication, building relations, becoming a better listener, and demonstrating empathy, developing resilience, and having agility are going to be, the main core competencies these days. Anyway, now we will quickly move to our last speaker, Mr. Vivek Atray, another distinguished speaker. Vivek is the author of Finding Success Within. He is a former IAS officer, which is Indian Administrative Service, and has held important assignments such as Director Industries, Director IT, and Director Tourism. He is a renowned motivational speaker with over 2 million views on YouTube. He has as many as 8 TEDx talks. His favorite subjects include emotional intelligence, public speaking skills, interpersonal relations, and life skills for young people. I will now hand over the mic to Vivek.
Thank you very much, Sangeet. It's a pleasure to be a part of this panel. What an enlightening panel, what a scintillating panel. And I already see some lovely questions and comments, which we'll take up at the end, I'm sure. Lovely to be speaking to audiences from across the world, perhaps, and definitely in Singapore and India for sure. A lot of people were showing interest and tuning in already and asking about when will it be on and how do we log in and stuff. So I guess that shows how successful it's already been. Congratulations to Sangeet and Navneet for putting this together. And here we are now with a couple of thoughts from my side. We've already heard Sandeep and Navneet talking about change. In my view, change is everlasting, and I will talk about the fact that this crisis is only a reminder that change takes place all the time. There is no before or after. It's not like before Corona and after Corona, like people are saying. There are so many things that happen of great magnitude in a century or even in a decade. We may even, I'm going to stick my neck out and say, 5 years later, we might not be talking at all about these times. There are things which happen which overtake history. And there are things which happen which make the past look a little redundant. So we learn from the past and we move on. We've been listening to Sandeep and Navneet on paradigms of change, how the work experience will change, how people will change in the way they work, the way they live, the way they interact, the way they cohabit, and the way they collaborate. Collaboration is absolutely the key to the future, but who can collaborate with others? People who have empathy for others and emotional intelligence are the people who can collaborate. There are loners and there are people who work alone. So you remember the story about the woodcutter who was asked to cut wood in the forest, and he was told that from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., whichever amount of wood he cuts, it will all be his. What happened to him was that by 5 o'clock he collapsed and he could not cut any wood. He had to be taken to the hospital. He did not have time to sharpen his axe. He did not have time to seek help. He did not have time to collaborate with anyone. Those who are self-centered will find it difficult to change. So what do we need to do in this era, in this time, in this moment? What we need to do is to upskill our emotional intelligence. We need to try and understand where our weak points lie. So I'm going to talk on the human level. The human level means that we need to introspect and go within and understand where we've been lacking till now. A knock on the knuckles or rap on the knuckles that we receive from God at this time is basically an opportunity to analyze where we are headed and where we were headed. It's time for course correction. And this rap on the knuckles has come at a big cost to humankind. But if we can make use of it to benefit humankind and the environment and the planet and humanity as a whole, then we might actually be better off for it. And I know that so many lives have been lost and tragedies have occurred, but humankind can actually come forth in a better avatar, and version next may be better than version previous. So what are the changes that we need to make in our own emotional intelligence? Firstly, we need to go within and analyze things like anger, short-temperedness, irritability, the ability or disability or lack of ability to work with others, impatience, irrational behavior, restlessness, These are negative traits which we all have to some extent. The Bhagavad Gita tells us 26 qualities of excellence that human beings should possess. All of us possess some of them. I can't go over all of them, I'll go through some of them. One of them is humility. Do we possess humility enough to praise others, look at others, notice others, be compassionate enough to ask questions of others? Or are we just within our own framework? Humility or lack of humility is not only about being pompous. It is about being so self-centered that we don't even have time to notice others. I often quote an example of two people working in an office. One of them is not feeling too well today, and the other one has no time even to look at him. Doesn't even realize that this chap is low today. Something is wrong. Nobody even asks him. They're all in their computers. They're all in their machines. So I often speak on artificial intelligence versus the human experience. Artificial intelligence is here to stay and it's going to seep into our lives. I often say that we might have a chip implanted in our wrists very soon, making us semi-automated. But can we carry out meaningful conversations, looking into the other person's eyes, maybe on a webcam, if not really? But I also believe that a year from now, we might not be as terrified as we are, and we may not even have to take the precautions we are taking now. Let's hope for that day when we can hug our friends, when we can have coffee with each other, and even be as pally and touchy-feely as we used to be. There are times and times. These times are the times to look within. And by looking within, we'll be able to realize that these shortcomings which we have are actually, we can overcome them. And by overcoming these shortcomings, we will be able to move forward. How are we moving forward? That is what matters. Introspection is something that I would advise especially young people to go into. So reorienting yourselves means that you are reorienting yourself for continually changing times. Not only now, you're going to analyze and introspect every week of your life henceforth. Where are my skills lacking? Am I the kind of person who feels more worried than others? Am I the kind of person who is more terrified than others? Am I the kind of individual who is emitting negative vibrations? We are in 2020 and mankind thinks that mankind has conquered all scientific frontiers. Of course, the virus has shown us we know very little about viruses at least. But there are things like vibrations which we don't even talk about. We don't talk about intuition. We haven't been able to understand intuition yet. There are so many things where we have to progress still in the coming centuries. And these coming centuries will teach us about intuition, about the power of just analyzing your thoughts and the power of vibrations which your thoughts emit. So think about your thoughts, analyze your thoughts, and then let us see whether we are contributing to negative vibrations or contributing to positive vibrations in this universe. If we are contributing to positive vibrations, I can assure you that you will receive what is called a very elusive quality, which is goodwill. Goodwill is something that I often believe is the earning of life. You met someone 25 years ago and you were helpful to that person. And today you go for something to a passport office or to an airport, or you go to an office for a meeting, you find that very individual sitting there. And he's able to tell you, do you remember you helped me 25 years ago? And if that happens to you, you've earned that goodwill. That means you have conquered your negativities and started empathizing with others and not remained in your own cocoon. Some of us may remember the film Growar, a Hindi film starring Amitabh Bachchan. And there was a villain, of a very gentlemanly, refined villain called Iftikhar. And Iftikhar and another villain, and I think his name was Mac Mohan. These two gentlemen, they visit a shoe polish boy. And the shoe polish boy doesn't accept coins which are thrown at him. And 25 years later, that boy becomes Amitabh Bachchan and they give him money and they throw it, a wad of notes, because he's a smuggler now with them. He says, I still don't accept money which is thrown at me. So these are the things in life which we need to understand. The person who's polishing the shoes is a human being, is someone to be considerate about. So do we have those skills which are required for the future? I believe that human beings will do well to learn less of technology, because technology is going to come to them anyway. Unless you're a scientific or computer science engineer and have to know the ins and outs of a machine, I am an electronics engineer, by the way, but I don't need to know until I am an engineer manufacturing these machines, technology beyond a certain level. So let's not be wedded to technology. Let's take the future in our stride and let's not be fearful. We have the ability to adapt, to change, to mutate our skills in a better manner. And then these skills will become bountiful, meaningful, fruitful for all of us and all those we come in touch with. And that is the meaning of life, spreading goodwill, joy, and peace and light, and the elusive quality of love and caring and sharing. I may sound like someone who's talking about perfection. Human beings are not perfect. We are imperfect, and that's why we're on this planet. So let's slightly reduce that imperfection, improve our qualities, 26 qualities, which I have read from the Gita. You can read any set of qualities. And if you try and improve your levels in each of them, then your life will become better, bountiful, and more meaningful. And one last tip for everyone, try and spend less screen time and more family time. In this era of Zoom and Facebook and YouTube Live, we have to enable ourselves to have more screen time anyway, because meetings are being carried out on screen. So as a result, something's got to give. Get rid of that WhatsApp time, which you used to spend a lot on. Get rid of that extra Instagram time where you were earlier, because you don't have space in your day. Spend more family time. These are the points I wanted to make. Sangeet, over to you, and it's a pleasure once again, I must say, to be part of this panel on Beyond Boundaries. Over to you, Sangeet.
Vivek, you seem to have charged up the remaining session. Thank you so much for that. I really like. I see. I think to go many takeaways. I think it was quite clear and points were quite sharp. I really liked when you said let's not be wedded to the technology. I think to be wedded to technology these days. But anyway, I'm going to look into it. Anyway, our lovely audience, it is time for our Q&A session. We have few minutes left, so we'll be able to take up only a few questions. But I promise you that we will personally write to you with the answers if you put it in your queries in the comment box. Okay, so let me take up the first question. This is by Mr. Rami. He says that 27 million jobs which were lost in the month of April in India alone in the age group of 30 years. Now, what happens after the lockdown is lifted completely? Would these jobs be taken over by freshers having specific skill sets? How do we prepare the youth with the new skill sets? Is it going to be a major challenge? I think, Sandeep, I would like you to take this question and answer it, please.
Yeah, I think the challenge that is circulating around how we reorient ourselves towards new jobs, it's always been there. But I think if we go back in time and look at the .com time when everybody was saying that there is going to be a big dislocation of jobs, that didn't quite occur. It became an opportunity for a lot in India anyway. So I think it's really a matter of realizing what you want to achieve. If you are a person with a certain skill set in, let's say, technology domain, then you have more options today. If you're yet not a person who has a skill set in the technology domain, maybe you will have a few more issues to deal with as you reorient yourself. But let's focus on some of the key jobs which are actually going to be much more meaningful for people. Things which require you to work in a collaborative fashion, but where the work can be segmented, such as digital writing, such as designing, writing a piece of code, such as being a therapist, not a physical therapist, but a mental therapist, such as somebody who can provide us consulting service. So there are certain services which you can provide very actively from a distance. Being an investor, being somebody who's creative. So a lot of these lessons have been learned already, where when we were starting to worry about how human beings can be automated out, yes, human beings can be automated out in automatable areas, but areas like accounting, like leadership, like creativity, motivating people, like innovation, those things will never get old. So as you examine your own skill set, you must look into some of these software areas, as those software areas are going to make you differentiated. So that's my piece of advice to a lot of people.
Thank you, Sandeep. This question is for Navneet from Arnaldo from Facebook. He says, as the economy and technology are progressing, so are the stress and depression cases. How to better cope with this exponential change, which at times becomes challenging to cope with? This COVID crisis has reflected upon us the power of taking a pause in life and reflect on ourselves, on how fragile we are. Would you agree with this?
Thank you for the question. Yes, human beings are very fragile. And I think the empowerment starts coming in when you realize you can choose to be as fragile or you can choose to be as resilient as you want. So, the whole core competency that you have to start off with is the competency of awareness. The awareness comes when you start getting clarity as to where you are, what is exactly affecting you, and where do you want to go ahead with it. So those three are the core areas, and that's why when I do my work, I delve a lot into awareness, delve a lot into what the mindset is, what the beliefs are. And really, like I said, on the change curve, it's a disruptive process. Are you willing to even dive into that disruption? A lot of people get scared, and there are various reasons why they do. But yes, people are fragile. But how fragile do you continue to be, I think, is a matter of choice. And once you get clarity and awareness on it, you are absolutely empowered to make the right choices. Whether it is during COVID, post COVID, or even post-COVID, whatever else hits you in life. So the inner strength, the resilience, some of the skills Sandeep was talking about, absolutely the skills Vivek was talking about. That's why we're saying all of those skills doesn't matter where you are or what you end up doing in the near future. They all will be absolutely essential. So I
Thank
hope
you.
that adds clarity.
Yes, thank you. We have a question from Mansher. In this age of automation, such epidemic has only shown how fragile human life is and how fragile is the economy. But there has also been strength shown to help each other. It has shown best and worst of us at the same time. How to retain the good in the world and prevent bad from overpowering the good. Vivek, maybe you could answer this.
Yeah, sure. Sangeet, do you have two devices on? Can you just switch off one of them if you have two devices on?
Do you have any other device on?
Okay, right. There was some comment on the right side. Okay,
Okay.
so we have the good and the bad and the ugly at the same time. I was actually writing a column today and I have mentioned It's a Wonderful Life even today. You remember the film called It's a Wonderful Life, black and white, 1946. And a Canadian judge actually sentenced a suicide attempter to go and watch that film, no other punishment. And the thing is that coexistence of evil and good will always be there. So the world is always going to be full of good guys and the bad guys. The bad guys in this case could be those who are carrying out deforestation, killing animals, destroying the environment, indulging in warlike actions or corruption or something like that. There are always going to be those people around, terrorism, and there are always going to be people who are trying to save the world from such people. So, your question, good will always win over bad, and humankind will always survive. I have read a book called The Holy Science by Sri Yukteswar. And in the Holy Science, he says, this earth will see many cycles of the kind we are seeing at present. So the earth goes from Nadir to heaven and goes back to Nadir. Or if you put it another way, it goes from Kalyug to Satyug via Dwapar Yug and Treta Yug. We are currently at the cusp of Dwapar Yug, which means that people who say that it is Kalyug, I don't agree with them because if you read the scriptures, Dwapar Yug started 250 years ago when the printing press and things started. So we are still facing Kalyug-like situations because we're still in the nascent stages of Dwapar Yuga. But don't worry, life is good and life is good if you think positively and look at the sunny side. Sangeet?
Very well said, Vivek. Beautifully said. We have a question from Manish Arya. He says, this is for Sandeep. The world is now exposed, vulnerable, and fragile. Jobs are not secure. Skilled professionals need to be super skilled. Correct. What are the side options we should look for apart from our normal routine jobs? And what do you advise on changing altogether a new career line? Would it be suicidal?
I think this is a very, very valuable question for anybody, any day, actually. And particularly more poignant today, we have more time to think and examine, and the options have certainly been made more obvious to us. But as you examine your daily work life, were you really happy with what you had? Were you really enjoying it? Do you think that was what you were designed to do? Or that's what you really wanted to do? Or that's what you did because your parents said you should do? Or because that's what you studied? And that's what you didn't know what you wanted, right? A lot of people walk into situations because they don't know what else they want. Okay, now is the time to figure out what you want. Examine everything. Do you need to have one job? Do you need to go to an office? Can you have four jobs? Can you be a person that controls his or her own destiny and provide meaningful, deeper services? If I was really always good at just being able to take a topic and make a presentation out of it by using my research, and everybody else made me do Excel work on the side, and I hated Excel, but I was really good at articulating crisply succinct messages out of a very complex object. Maybe I can do that for five people as opposed to doing Excel and Word and PowerPoint and everything else and putting it in a very office-like fashion. Today, you can do that. There will be very soon an opportunity for you to take one skill that you're awesome at, identify that, believe in it, sharpen it. The funny part is there are plentiful options available for you to go online and find some more verifications of your skills, some more ways to augment your skills. And as long as you're open minded and willing to question everything, you will find something that you're really excited by, and you will find something that others feel you are really contributing at a higher level than anybody else can in your domain. So I think it's a self search journey as well to a great extent. As you introspect, you learn more about yourself and your own ability and desires. So thank you.
Sandeep, another question for you. What are the sectors or industries that would be hiring post COVID-19 and in the next phase?
I think a lot of healthcare hiring will occur because healthcare is going to be a critical aspect of where we are, and healthcare will be more personalized to a great extent. I think there'll be a lot of hiring, particularly in IT, a lot of hiring in education technology for sure. We're seeing quite a bit of that. We're seeing much more content creation, digitalization hiring taking place. We're also seeing hiring across the board in um, rehiring across the board in industrialization, as a lot of countries and a lot of cities and regions are bringing manufacturing back closer to themselves. And that's going to augment a requirement for new skills as well. So I think while we think that manufacturing is a very old sector, it's a secondary sector, it's going to become a primary source of employment for a lot of people in your own neighborhoods. So you must re-examine the new economy, put that in the context not only of distance economy, but also in the context of digital economy, where one of the biggest changes in manufacturing was already taking place with 3D manufacturing. I could bring manufacturing through additive manufacturing closer to my home. I don't need to outsource it. That's going to become increasingly one driver augmented by localization due to economic reasons. So I think we should look at every option at this time as an option. Things which will slow down tourism, hospitality, travel need to be careful, particularly for people for a while as you reskill yourself into new domains.
Thank you, Sandeep. We have a question from Jyoti Chauhan, and I think Vivek will be able to answer this. How to keep self motivated consistently, especially when one is away from family and friends during this time, and of course later.
See, motivation comes from within, and most of our qualities they come from within. They don't come from ice cream or apples or travel or anything else. So, motivation has to come from our inner urges for happiness. So, we get up in the morning with a zing in our body, mind, soul. Actually, people who can self-propel themselves despite trying circumstances are achievers and successful. They go through trying circumstances knowing that tomorrow will come. So lack of motivation is basically based on the fact that you are you are drowned by circumstances, and also company matters. So even if you're not with family and friends, your colleague has to be someone who's, at times at least talking about good stuff. If he's going on cribbing all the time, you tell him to shut up and tell him that, I mean, take a reality check. Everything in the world cannot be disastrous. So just try and balance your own thoughts as well. I often follow the 80-20 rule or the 90-10. 90% of the time, I should be gung ho and positive and cheerful. Sometimes I can feel low. But if it's the other way around, then you have a problem. So try and motivate yourself.
Thank you, Vivek. Sandeep, there's a question from Mr. Rami. I think you answered his question. He says, "Thanks, Sandeep, for an answer, but I am worried. Given the present setup and poor infrastructure, it's going to be a steep climb to create the desired skill sets for the youth already thrown out from their jobs by the industry. How do we create and ensure livelihood for such class?" It's $1 million question.
No, I fully agree. I think it's a huge question, but at the same time, this is a very difficult topic to handle in a matter of a minute. It's a 1 hour webinar in itself, how to handle the new challenge for youths. But I think it's really a matter of looking at it from a minute bottom-up perspective. A top-down answer, a theoretical, emotional answer won't work. It's a real challenge. The challenge has to be taken up from industry by industry to examine which industries lend themselves to core skill movement. And there are efforts underway. There are online options underway which will take you to a certain level. But I also think that out of this dislocation will come an acceleration in new types of jobs. We can spend much more time on that, but happy to take this offline and provide a longer written answer to this as well. It'll require more thinking and deeper analysis. It cannot just be a feel-good answer right now. I appreciate the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandeep. Another question for you. This is from Anupama Khetan from Mumbai. What will be a newer option for new startups, especially in the education sector?
So this is, I think we are seeing amazing opportunities in education and other sectors. Let's just focus on that. A lot of education providers are now realizing that they can, for the first time, access customers much faster. If I knocked on your door as a parent and said, "Could you buy online learning for your child?" 4 months ago, you would say, "Are you kidding me? I would rather send my children to Mr. or Miss XYZ around the neighborhood because he or she is known to be a great tutor in this subject." That Mr. or Miss XYZ is no longer your option unless they've gone onto Zoom and created a class. Maybe that's the case. But now, when you go onto that network, you realize, oh my God, that Mr. or Miss XYZ has competition from a global set of providers, and they are much better, much more relevant. So now, for the first time, you're willing to buy digital services for your children. That is amazing. The cost of acquisition for students online has fallen 4 times to 1/4 in a matter of 3 months. Again, amongst our own companies that we've invested in. If that is happening, which was a big question, the motivation pull wasn't there. The pull is there. If you're looking to be part of an education startup, this is an excellent opportunity to create a product, either for education institutions or for individuals to learn from. B2B or B2C, both are possible, and where the buying interest is much higher today. Everybody will talk to you now.
Question, we have time for 2 more questions. Navneet, there's a question for you. The name is, I can't figure out. Anyway, the question is, at what stage of the change cycle are we in currently? I mean, what do you feel about it?
It's a good question, and I don't think we collectively are at any one stage. We individually are at different stages. Okay, I feel from what I have observed, again, people who are more aware would move a lot faster through the change cycle. The reason being simply because if you're more aware, you start make meaning, the true meaning of what is going on, and you hence proceed a lot faster. I think a lot of people, generally speaking, have moved from stage 1 and 2, or that's my ardent hope that they have. I still find some people stuck there, though. There are people in stage 3 who are beginning to question it. But I do see a lot of the leaders who are taking the lead and who are very mindful and aware already moving on to stage 4 and possibly also stage 5. We are absolutely not anywhere close to stage 6.
Okay.
So
The last question from Radhika Chaudhary. She says, for a sales professional, what do you recommend to do considering that we won't have focus on face-to-face meetings? What skills need to be worked upon for self-development, which could help in future? And I think Vivek can answer that.
Yeah, so self-development is something we need to focus on. And Daniel Goleman said that emotional intelligence, the first step is self-analysis, self-awareness. So once you have self-awareness, you will realize what are the steps that you lack. Work on them constructively, not airy-fairy, Sit down and analyze, make a note of what you need to do, consciously practice that, and calmness in the mind, collectedness will help. In all situations, there will be one person who's panicky, the other person is cool. The situation is the same. You need to be that cool guy. Try to be that.
Thank you, Vivek. Thank you to all our wonderful speakers for such an insightful session. And thank you all for such overwhelming participation. You can follow us on our Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube channels. And please keep the questions flowing because we will answer them until we switch off. You will get your replies. Also, share your preference for the next session and the topics you would like to be discussed and represented in our next webinar. Until then, take good care and keep smiling. Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.